I'm a 70-year-old man who lives in a relatively secluded part of Quebec, a town with 2,000 inhabitants 8 months a year, a number that grows to 5,000 in the summer because of the numerous camping spots. I live around one of those camping spots. My street is a small, bumpy road between two cow cornfields. In May and June, it always smells of manure around here. There's the farmer house next to the field, and then a dozen nearby, but mine is further away, right next to the camping area. Before the camping, there were exactly 6 houses. Mine, 2 summer chalets. One can rent at the camping gate, and the other 3 belong to my brothers and sisters. This camping area also belongs to one of my brothers, so you could say that I live in the place, you know? Familiar. Summer is noisy and a bit annoying because of the campers, but I deal with it mostly because I escape every other weekend to my own chalet in the north, so I don't have to see anyone. It's not that I'm antisocial or anything, but the camping crowd can be quite exhausting. And well, I like my own pace. The reason I still live there is that I love winters. Well, more precisely, I like the autumn bordering on winter season, when there's a small blanket of snow on the ground, and the rabbit's fur turns white. They're just like little jumping white dots in the forest, so easy to see when the snow is melted. You know, I'm not much of a hunter, but my dad showed me everything I needed to know about laying traps for small prey like rabbits. And I would be a big fat liar if I said I don't like me some homemade rabbit stew during cold winter nights. Our winters here are harsh. Unbelievably rough. We lose power every other week, sometimes for several days. We're snowed in. The town doesn't even bother sending trucks to help us out. Because, well, we're only 6 people down here. Even with all of that, though, this place has always been my little corner of paradise. Now, the story I'm about to tell you happened to me there. I'm telling you now, because, well, I can't live there anymore. I'm telling you this story because I've kept it to myself for over 40 years, and I don't see a single reason to keep it anymore. I was about 30 years old when it happened. It was the beginning of winter. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, but not enough that the rabbits could hide with their white fur in it. I was doing the rounds of many traps, and I was already up to 4 rabbits. Needless to say, I was quite content with my catch, and I was on my way back home when I heard it. The sound of one of my traps going off again, and one I just set. Now, of course, I was happy, but then I heard it again. Another one of my traps got triggered, and then another one. I could understand one, maybe call it a miracle for 2 simultaneously, but at the third one, well, I knew something was off. At first, I thought I'd set it up wrong, so I turned back and decided to check on my traps. It wasn't a big deal, but I wanted to get back home and arrange the rabbits before dark. I always took my walk around my traps around 3 p.m., and where I live, during the winter, the sun is down by 4 or 4:15. I didn't have much time, but leaving my traps like that would be no good. When I reached the first trap, it was empty, just as I expected. I must have set it wrong, even though that's not something that often happens to me. I checked to see if anything on it was broken, but it all looked to be in order. I didn't really know what else to do, and so I set it back up. I barely had the time to stand up and turn around that it went off again. When I turned and looked at the trap I'd just fixed, I saw something in the corner of my eye. I dropped the rabbits and pointed my .22 in the direction that I saw something. There wasn't anything, and I had that odd sensation that I didn't feel alone anymore. My trap was broken either purposely or on its own. but I thought someone was fucking with me. All I could see around me was the empty forest, some snow patches, and a bunch of naked trees. I exhaled heavily as I realized that there wasn't anything. Then I picked up my rabbits from the ground, and I reset the trap again. With all that and the sun starting to settle down, it was time to head back home. By the time I'd reach the edge of the forest, it would be already dark enough, meaning 3 of my traps wouldn't be set for the night. The next day, I went out earlier. When I found the first trap, it was broken, and there was a ton of blood around it. I'm not talking rabbit-sized pints of blood spread around the trap. Oh no, I'm talking a pool of blood and pieces of my broken trap floating in it. It wasn't deep, but there was at least 3 or 4 rabbits worth of blood in the pool. I dug around the snow a little to let the blood flow out, and at the bottom of that pool was a single paw print left behind. My best guess would be a bear who got out of hibernation, destroyed both the rabbit and the trap. That didn't explain all of the blood. The trap was pretty much unusable too. And I create spring traps of my own, but to repair this one would be more work than just making another one. I moved on to the next trap and found the same scenario. However, I wasn't alone this time. I heard steps behind me. Now, last night there was a forecast of icy rain, so the snow was just the right level of crunchy to prevent sneaking up. Not that whoever was sneaking up on me realized it. I turned around in a flash and pointed my .22 in the direction of the noise. Then, I quickly scanned the horizon. I couldn't see a damn thing other than dead trees and snow. Once again, I dug through the snow, let the blood flow, and found my broken trap in pieces. No rabbit paw, though. Actually, nothing that would justify that amount of blood in any case. I heard the sound of someone vomiting behind me, and the telltale splash of liquid hitting the cold, icy ground. Again, there wasn't anyone there, but there was a new pool of blood in the distance. Or had it been there before and I just didn't notice? I kept my .22 up as I walked toward the pool of blood, and I found what I think were a dozen of tiny skeletons in the middle of it. It didn't take an expert to know they belonged to either rabbits, squirrels, or any other small animals this forest hosted. I lifted my rifle up as fast as I could and barely had the time to hear a groan before I was hit in the side of the head. When I woke up, I was laying next to the skeletons in the pool of blood, half my face suffering a painful frostbite, the other half sticky with frozen blood. My fingers were still clutched around my gun, but I was alone. I also found the weapon, so to speak. I was hit in the head with a large branch covered in ice. Charming. I should probably mention that said branch was so heavy, I couldn't lift it, so whatever hit me was pretty damn strong. Anyway, I hobbled my way back home, cleaned up, and rested for the rest of the evening, hoping my face wouldn't scar. One half of my face was that weird purple burgundy frostbite color, and I couldn't even open my mouth entirely because of that. It took a few hours for me to start getting feelings in my cheeks again. On the next day, I debated going back into the forest. I mean, yeah, sure, there were my traps, but whatever was there was obviously waiting for me to come back. Maybe this time armed with more than a branch. Now, I got lucky, it probably thought I was dead. But you know, I was young and curious and, well, probably a bit stupid and reckless too. No, scratch that. I was definitely stupid. I mean, who would go back out in the middle of the forest without help at that point? Well, just me apparently. I put on warmer clothes thinking that if I were to get knocked out this time, at least I wouldn't freeze to death. I also put on a ski mask because the wind was a biting cold. My entire face hurt like hell. Now you're probably thinking, Well, he's going back to get his traps back. No, I wasn't. I really wanted to know who or what was messing with me. I only remembered seeing something black and white before crashing to the ground, and since it didn't really look human or like any animal I knew, I just had to find out what the hell it was. Now, I don't believe in creatures like the Yeti. Besides, if he existed, I was pretty sure it lived in the cold of Siberia or some place on another continent. It was too hot here in the summer for a beast like that. But whatever it was, I was going to find out. I ignored the 2 traps in the frozen blood pool from the day before and kept going toward my 3rd and 4th traps. When I got there, I found bones and blood again, and the wind was howling. It was loud like a whistle coming through the branches. The forest was empty, but I didn't feel alone. I knew it was there somewhere watching me, waiting for an opportunity to get the jump on me. As I crouched to check my trap, I heard the snow cracking behind me. I pretend I didn't hear because I wanted to see what it was. And after maybe 3 more seconds, I suddenly jumped to the side and turned around. What I saw was hard to explain. I was sure my eyes were deceiving me. It was bitter cold, maybe they were freezing. But I only caught a glimpse for half a second before I was shoved to the ground, and it was snarling in my face. I could feel the claws of its 4 arms digging in the flesh of my shoulders and thighs, keeping me grounded. Its breath was as fetid as you would expect. Its teeth yellow and covered in green-brown, built up from years of neglect. Its entire face was black, and there was a single white eye in the middle. I had no idea what this thing was, but it unleashed a scream in my face, and then it puked blood all over me. Now I swear I felt my heart stop at that moment. The texture, the stench, the warmth of it all made me sick to my very core. I remember squirming in its grasp, its sharp talons digging deeper into my skin. Its claws cut through many layers. They buried in my flesh as if there was no obstacle between them and my skin. I turned my head and vomited. I couldn't see whenever I had opened my eyes, and my vision was blurry and red. My eardrums felt like exploding with each banshee scream escaping from that ravenous beast. It lifted my upper half and slammed me down into the snow once, twice, 3 times, until I stopped struggling, until I felt a pool of my own blood soaking through the sleeves of my coat and the legs of my pants. I stopped moving altogether, hoping this thing would think that I'm dead and leave me be. My entire body was in pain, and my face was covered in a mix of stomach acid, gore, and pieces of rabbit innards. I could do nothing to defend myself or get the beast to let go of me. I was convinced I was going to die right then and there, that I too, just like all the other rabbits, would end up nothing but a pool of blood and bones. I reopened my eyes one last time as I saw its long, slimy black tongue fall from its mouth. It passed on my cheek and then made a face I could only describe as pure, undiluted disgust at me. It sniffed a snuffling noise as its huge cyclopean bulging eye darted back and forth, spasming in its slimy blood-red-hued socket. A dripping of green-tinted eye goo falling on top of me. Something clicked loudly in the back of its throat, and I felt the claws retract from my flesh, and I released a sigh under my breath, trying to stay as still as can be, trying not to shit myself. But imagine being stabbed by 20 small knives in all of your limbs, then the blades being pulled out at the same time. I felt like I had been run through a meat tenderizer. I felt my blood gushing on my left thigh, and I prayed like hell that the creature didn't slice through anything important. It peered at me one last time with its glossy giant eye, discharge trickling yet again over my face, the stench of it permeating my nostrils, and then it jumped off of me and ran back into the forest. I stayed there for 10 minutes, completely paralyzed by pain and blood loss. It took every bit of my strength for me to crawl my way back home. When I finally made it back home, I peeled my reeking clothes off of my body as I stumbled through my house. I remember hearing the distinct sound of my shirt as it hit the ground, so soaked with sweat and blood, I was sure it would leave a stain on the linoleum. Climbing the stairs to get to the bathroom was painful, and with every step, a little more blood left the gashes and puncture wounds on my left thigh. I managed to get into the bathroom. Shaking, I saw my blood-coated face in the mirror, pale and anemic. I instantly gagged at the sight. I cleaned up the best I could despite the weakness possessing my body. I passed out shortly after, only to wake up again, clean more, bandage, and to pass out again. I finally made it to the local clinic 2 days later, dehydrated and near death. In a time when I was somewhat conscious, I had called for help. It was right on time. Any later and I wouldn't have made it. Now, I told everybody that I was attacked by a bear. I was lucky I knew some basic first aid, but I still needed 41 stitches for the wounds the thing left me with. Now, for the past 44 years, when people asked, yeah, those are bear scars. I mean, who would have believed the real story? And nobody would have thought I was dumb enough to stay there and keep trapping. But you know what? I did. I stayed in my corner of the world, kept my traps where they were, and luckily, I haven't seen that thing a single time after that incident. A few months after I healed, I went back. However, I did carry a much bigger gun with me though.